Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and this week we have a Wednesday alpha build, which means we get a Wednesday video where I go through the patch notes and take a look at what is coming. So, first off, in this week's War Within alpha build, there's a new racial for humans. So, they are replacing diplomacy, and they've talked about this already, but the reason that they are doing this is because the way that Warband reputation works is that most important reputations from now on are going to be account wide. They're going to be warband wide, and diplomacy didn't make much sense in that kind of world because it would have created an incentive to just have everybody play a human on at least their first character, the first character they played each expansion, get a big benefit in those rep grinds that way. There was already some incentive to do that. If you were really turbo min-maxing certain reps, you'd see people doing that in some of the top guilds for stuff like the seed farming, those sorts of things, where there was a little bit of benefit to playing human for those, although several reputations, I think, actually got, maybe not human racial nerfed, they did get the Darkmoon Fair rep bonus removed from them for certain reputations that it mattered for, but anyways, that's why they're doing this. And they're changing it into No Place Like Home. Your Hearthstone cooldown is reduced by 5 minutes, and it gains an additional charge. It was kind of boring. I don't know. I guess it's something, right? Like your Hearthstone goes from, I think it's a 15-minute CD if you're in a guild with all the guild stuff. Maybe it's 30 though, but I think it's 15. So now it would be 10 with 2 charges. So you basically Hearth anytime you wanted. It would be very hard to run out of charges of that, but I don't know. I feel like you basically already can Hearth whenever you want to, especially because you have the Dalaran Hearthstone and the Garrison Hearthstone available to be sort of backup Hearths. Plus a bunch of classes have some kind of, Dreamwalk or Deathgate or Portals or Astral Recall, all these different kind of things. So, I don't know. I feel like this is a pretty boring racial, but that's not necessarily the end of the world. Humans still have Will to Survive, which is a strong, thing in actual content. But yeah, they've gone from having, I think, one of the more powerful, non-combat passive ones to one of the weaker ones. All right, let's take a look at what's happening to all of our favorite classes. Starting off with Death Knight, we have some Deathbringer tuning. They're buffing Wave of Souls and Exterminate's Second Scythe. Rider of the Apocalypse is also seeing a bunch of buffs here to damage and cast frequency of all of the different either damage or damage and cast frequency for all of the different riders of the Apocalypse. These sorts of changes we don't really look at too much in this kind of video because it's, early alpha tuning type stuff. These big number swing changes it's hard to just kind of have a ballpark of what these mean, whether this is going to be an OP or underpowered talent tree. There are probably many more such changes in the future that we can look at, but yeah, we mostly don't look at these sorts of notes too much because there's just not too much. Like there are people who could tell you, oh, Rider of the Apocalypse was this tuning, and now it's going to be this kind of tuning, but that requires a degree of looking at alpha logs that come from really good players that is pretty hard to do. There's not really a good place that all that stuff is collected, so you have to be really. There's just a couple people in the top guilds that have been really looking at all this stuff, and it's not something I've been doing. Sand Lane, on the other hand, has a functional change, which is Incite Terror has been updated. Vampiric Strike, Heart Strike, and Scourge Strike cause your targets to take 1% increased shadow damage up to 5% for 15 seconds. Vampiric Strike benefits 300% more from this effect. I wonder if that means that Vampiric Strike will cause them to take 3% increased shadow damage, or if it's just, Vampiric Strike will deal 15% instead of 5% increased if the target has full stacks of this effect. Blood, so we've got another talent tree update to Blood DK. This is a talent tree now that has been adjusted. I think this is the third alpha build where Blood DK is getting medium to severe talent updating. Up first, we have a new talent called Bone Collector. When you would pull an enemy, generate 1 charge of Bone Shield. This wording makes me hopeful that this will work even on non-pullable enemies. And this does add back in some amount of Bone Shield generation to A-Bomb Limb, although notably a lot less than it used to have, especially, I think on single target, it won't try to pull anything for... Actually, I don't think it pulls anything... I don't think it tries to pull anything in melee range of you, so you would need things to be getting either pulled in or be pull-in immune, but far enough away that it tries to pull them in. New talent, Ossified Vitriol. When you lose a Bone Shield charge, the damage of your next Mirror Rend is increased by 15%, stacking up to 75%. I like this idea. Mirror Rend is a very low damage button, but they don't want it to be spammable, right? Because if it becomes something that you actually do press over, say, Heart Strike, then that's bad, because it's also generating your Bone Shield charges. But if you make it do damage, but only when you're actually using it for its intended purpose, which is once every so often as you need to refill your Bone Shields, then I think that's pretty good. If anything, maybe this is the kind of talent they could amp up the percent more on, so that Mirror End becomes a very good-feeling button to press, but only when you're supposed to press it. Tightening Grasp now silences enemies for 3 seconds when they're pulled, and no longer increases the damage enemies take from you when they are pulled by Gorfien's Grasp. So Tightening Grasp also provides cooldown reduction to Gorfien's Grasp, and that's usually the main reason you take it. And now it's going to come with a small AoE silence effect. 3 seconds isn't very long, but it's not nothing. But you're already getting an interrupt out of gripping things, right? Things getting gripped are already being interrupted. I don't know. It's nice little increase in power there, kind of to try and help Blood DK have something, I guess, Sigil of Silence shaped, but I don't know, still seems quite a long shot off of that. Blood Drinker now reduces the damage the enemy deals to you by 20% while channeling, and for an additional 5 seconds after channeling it fully. Now also generates 20 additional runic power over its duration. Love it. Blood Drinker's been kind of left by the wayside, but now you turn it into a small damage reduction when you're channeling it on something, so maybe you could use this on certain fights like Rashok as part of your plan to survive the initial hits of certain tank mechanics. Yeah, that seems cool. This seems like something that'll make Blood Drinker much more interesting. Not any helpful in AoE, very single target specialized, both offensively and defensively. But that's fine. Maybe it'll be worth using in that case. Consumption now causes your Blood Plague damage to occur 50% more quickly for 8 seconds and generates 2 runes. Bone Storm no longer costs runic power. Now it costs up to 10 Bone Shield charges, lasts 1 second for each charge, and generates a charge every second while active. Okay, so you press this thing at 10 charges, it lasts 10 seconds, and it'll have generated 10 charges by the end of those 10 seconds, so it's effectively free. However, for the first second, you're not going to have any Bone Shield charges if it doesn't generate one instantly. And even if it does generate one instantly, it might get killed instantly, right? It might get, hit right away. So at least for the first second, and maybe for the first, 3 seconds, you might actually be vulnerable as a result of casting Bone Storm. You might be in a spot where you're getting hit without any Bone Shield charges. Particularly that first global after hitting it, you're probably in a medium amount of danger. But maybe you do something like pop a defensive and then press Bone Storm. Yeah, I mean, if this does a lot of damage, this will be cool. And now that it's gonna, if it is effectively free, right? Like it gives you all the Bone Shield charges back. That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. And I guess it'll also give you a full set of Ossified Vitriol. It may give you full cooldown reduction on Rune Weapon. Have other interactions with both generating and spending your Bone Shields. Reinforced Bones now also lets Bone Shield stack 2 additional times. Okay, that will let you press Bone Storm at 12 instead of 10 and be a lot safer. Heartbreaker's RP per target hit increased to 2, and it's now a 1-point talent. Was 2. Nice. Perseverance of the Ebon Blade's versatility bonus has been increased to 6% from 4, and it's now a 1-point talent. Shattering Bone is now a 1-point talent. That talent does a lot of damage and was a part of a tree where you don't have a lot of points. That's the very bottom of the tree. Red Thirst now reduces the cooldown on Vamp Blood by 2 seconds, was 1, and now a 1-point talent as well. That's another point at the bottom of the tree. So Blood Decay is going to be able to take a lot of the bottom of the tree now. Like now you could feasibly take Bone Storm and maybe also get like Umbilicus. At least you can get Bone Storm and a full Red Thirst, which is pretty cool. Crimson Scourge and Death's Caress are also now baseline, it looks like. Okay. Frost Decay, new talent, Hyperpyrexia. Your runic power spending abilities have a chance to additionally deal 30% of the damage dealt over 4 seconds. So depending on this chance, you multiply that chance by 30%, and you get how much of an increase in damage this is to your RP spending abilities. Unholy, Festering Scythe is a new talent. Every 20 festering wounds you burst, Empowers Festering Strike to become Festering Scythe for 12 seconds. Festering Scythe sweeps through all enemies within 14 yards in the front of you, dealing shadow damage and infecting them with 2 to 3 festering wounds. Okay. So this gives you a little bit of an AoE situation where, like, in AoE you can pop wounds easily with Scourge Strike in AoE, but applying wounds in AoE is something you can only really do in your cooldowns, and this is going to now give you a way to every so often apply a bunch of wounds in AoE as well. And if you're in a big enough pull, maybe this will let you do, a reasonable approximation of like 4 Scourge Strikes into 1 Festering Scythe, into 4 Scourge Strikes into 1 Festering Scythe, and kind of always be popping wounds. Decomposition here says, Virulent Plague has a chance to abruptly flare up, dealing 50 or 100% of the damage it dealt to the target over the last 4 seconds. When this triggers, the duration of your active minions are increased by 1 second up to 3 seconds, and this is a 2-point talent that you can take as well, potentially giving you 3 more seconds on all your big guys. And Infected Claws has been moved to the node after Ghoulish Frenzy. All right, Demon Hunter time. Eldrachi Reaver is the hero talent tree. I mean, I guess both hero talent trees are shared by Havoc and Vengeance. This is the one that has the combo of abilities. You press one button, it empowers a certain other button. And they have made it so Wounded Quarry now always procs bonus damage, but the Soul Fragment generation on it is still a chance. Reaver's mark duration has been increased. Art of the Glaive activation threshold is doubled. So I think this is the thing that transforms your Throw Glaive every 3 or 20 soul fragments consumed. So I guess that will now be 6 or 40 soul fragments consumed, making it something that happens less often. Intent Pursuit cooldown reduction increased to 4 seconds. Evasive action no longer extends Tactical Retreat Fury generation and no longer resets initiative. And Reaver's Glaive damage has been increased by 200%. I think that's the thing that procs once Art of the Glaive happens. So you'll do it less often. It will do more damage. It doesn't look like they're really changing too much of the idea of Eldrachi Reaver, which is, you get in these little windows where you have 5 seconds and you want to press certain abilities in a very specific order. We'll see. That one has been pretty hit or miss, mostly miss, among DHs that I know, but I have yet to actually test it out myself, so I don't want to be too harsh on it. I haven't played much DH on Alpha, so... all right, let's move on to Druid. Druid of the Claw. Ravage and Dreadful Wound damage up by 10%. Dreadful Wound now reduces damage dealt to you by 4% for Feral and 10% per Guardian, so they're trying to make this tree a little bit less insane for Feral defensively, I imagine. Because I assume that this used to be just 10%. I'm not 100% sure, actually. That maybe they're adding a DR that didn't used to be there, but I think I remember it used to do that. Feral's Aggravate Wounds now triggers from any ability that costs energy. Empowered Shapeshifting now increases the damage of the next Mangle by 10% and Swipe and Shred by 3%, was 5%. So better if you use it on Mangle, worse if you use it on Swipe or Shred. Strike for the Heart now increases critical strike chance and damage by 6%, down from 8%, and it now causes Mangle to heal Guardian Druids for 1% of their max HP. Feral's Wild Power Surge now increases the damage of your next Swipe by 50% or Mangle by 200%. So they're making it, again, better to use Mangle on this stuff and worse to use Swipe. And Guardians now increase the damage of your next Bite or Rip by 100%, was 50%, so it's better for Guardian just all around. And finally, Wild Shape Mastery's retention of bear form stats in cat form also retains bear form's resistance to being crit or parried. That's big, actually. That was one of the big downsides of this tree, was that you could still get crit and parried if you were trying to cat weave in combat with threat as a bear. And now you will be able to do that without, running the risk of getting crit and getting murdered. All right, Feral. Primal Wrath's range has been buffed to 10 yards, was 8. A connector's been added between Primal Wrath and Pouncing Strikes. Rampant Ferocity's damage has been increased by up to 50% when the player spends extra energy on Ferocious Bite. And Thrashing Claws now requires players to know Thrash in order to apply the bleed from Thrash. Fair enough. There are a few abilities like this as well that, particularly if their heart is set on reducing our melee range, there are certainly some abilities that they should make sure that they buff the range of. Things that used to be AoEs based on your melee range should definitely be amped up to be a little bit easier to hit every target in a pull still. I think Blade Flurry was a good example of that. They did that in the last build. Primal Wrath is certainly another. Resto. Dev note. We're making some changes to raid healing cooldowns in War Within to increase their effectiveness and content with less than 20 players. Okay. Our goal is to make these spells feel powerful in all contents, particularly smaller dungeon, PvP, or raid groups. The healing of these cooldowns will remain equal when healing 20 injured allies as they previously did, and only take into account healing injured allies as contributing to their splash cap. This will be a slight reduction in effectiveness when healing more than 20 players, but this trade-off has seemed reasonable to us as the availability and strength goes up as group sizes increase. Trank's initial healing has been increased by 400%, now decreases beyond 5 targets, and we know that it decreases down to 100%, right? Down from 400 back to 100 at 20 targets. And its heal over time effect is no longer increased while out of a raid environment. So the initial healing it's basically going to be like a revival-sized hit in 5-player content, which seems fair. It's a little bit more powerful than it looks as well, because it's not going to, if you have anybody who is uninjured, they aren't going to eat up the Trank healing for the splash cap. Now, it's pretty rare for somebody to be completely uninjured, right? Often somebody will be at 90% because they were a Warlock and they pressed a defensive, and then somebody else will be at 40%, and your Trank is going to still heal both of those targets, so it will still get reduced because it's trying to heal the Warlock. But potentially you could have a Paladin bubble and then not get hit by the damage that you want to Trank heal, and then they won't eat into the Trank healing. And if there are a lot of raid healing cooldowns that work like this, using immunities on certain characters to make the raid healing a little bit more powerful might actually be something that you intentionally do. But I love this idea of making these things more powerful in 5-player content, because there's very often some abilities just feel super weak in 5-player content. In particular, I know it's not a healer cooldown, but I really hope they extend this to Rally for warriors. I hope that's further down in these patch notes. I think that is an ability that really needs this kind of effect. All right, Evoker. Chrono Warden. Time Convergence no longer grants stamina using a defensive cooldown longer than 45 seconds. It now also specifies that it only functions when casting non-defensive abilities. Augmentation. A new passive, Sense Power. While enabled, all allies with their major cooldown active will be highlighted in the game field and will display a buff icon on party and raid frames. Learned automatically can be toggled on and off. Love it. This is a really good way of making Aug a little bit more friendly to being played without weak auras, which is really nice. Obviously, to get the full sauce on augmentation, you're going to still want to track cooldowns, to pre-plan out all your auging and stuff like that, but this is going to go a long way towards making it so that if you're in, just a heroic raid, you can just be like, all right, it's time for me to cast my Ebonmite, or it's time for me to cast my Presciences and set up my Ebonmite. Who is CDing, right? And then give them those Presciences. Prescience has been updated. When cast without a friendly target, the smart targeting will now prefer damage roll players who have their major cooldowns active. Love it again. So you don't even need Sense Power to be doing this. If you just target the boss while you press Prescience, it will send it to somebody more useful on average. Great. Augmentation, there's a lot of stuff that can be done to bring up the floor for augmentation. I think also the ceiling still needs to be brought down for augmentation being played at the most hyper-optimized. That's something that, if they can come up with clever ways to accomplish both of those things at the same time, it's going to be really good. Because right now, it's definitely in a place where, if you're a casual augmentation enjoyer, if you're a super casual augmentation enjoyer, you don't care about any of the, throughput stuff, and that's fine. But if you're medium casual, augmentation in its current state feels so much worse than it did in Season 2 when it was just blatantly overpowered in all forms of content, right? And it's since been nerfed by a huge amount. But it's still good enough to be played, 2 copies in every race to world first for all of time from here on out, and 4 copies potentially in some races. And that is it's not the end of the world, obviously, if a spec is really good at the high end, but Aug is so good and the gameplay as well. It's not just race to world first guilds, but bleeding down into the top end of the cutting edge range. The gameplay is really, really bad for being one of those augmentation evoker players with your spreadsheets and your weak aura that reads your spreadsheet and then glows frames and stuff accordingly for the whole fight. So that is something that it's a huge problem to actually tackle. It's not the end of the world if they can't solve it quickly or necessarily in 11.0, but it is something that the game would get better if they do fix. And simultaneously, If they can fix that, then it makes it easier for them to buff the baseline abilities so that people who are just casting Prescience without a friendly target can have the spec perform better again without it, absolutely breaking the top end, and not just the top end, but like the medium top end of the game like it did in Season 2. All right, Devastation. Feed the Flames once again triggers a Firestorm after casting 10 Pyres. This is in addition to its new effect of increasing Pyre and Disintegrate damage while they're inside Firestorm. And Snapfire can now trigger from both Living Flame and Pyre. So they're really trying to make sure that a Firestorm build is viable without changing the core part of Firestorm, which is that it is a very long-lasting ground dot that is therefore very susceptible to being used in the real world where things don't necessarily stand in it for a long time. Like even Rain of Fire and stuff, mobs get moved out of. Firestorm is like a Rain of Fire that lasts twice as long. And that is a very dangerous place for, you to have your power in. Obviously, it's not the end of the world. People can keep stuff inside Frozen Orbs and Blizzards and stuff. So Firestorm might be possible to be like that, but it's always going to be a little clunky. Preservation, Dreamflight healing has been increased by 100% outside of raid. So they're doing a different thing to this than they did with Trank. Not just increasing the initial healing and having it fall off beyond 5 targets. This time they're just giving it the outside of raid treatment. And they say, we'd like to note that we're making an exception in the case of Dreamflight, as we feel the healing increase outside of raid is a more appropriate tool for consistency, as otherwise the fall off of its healing would make its effectiveness inconsistent in raid scenarios. Okay. Mana cost of Emerald Blossom has been reduced. Flow State can now trigger from Empower spells cast from Stasis, and Threads of Fate can no longer trigger from Empower spells cast from Stasis. There is inconsistency here, but it's necessary to balance Threads of Fate between AUG and Prez. Threads of Fate tooltip now also indicates casting an Empower spell, while Flow State does not use the keyword casting. Okay. I mean, fair enough. I think sometimes a little bit of inconsistency can be fine, but, the word casting, I mean, there are a lot of effects like this where whether it says casting or not, you kind of have to just learn whether certain things proc certain things. So, fair enough. Survival. Lunge no longer increases attack range by 3 yards. This is just the same note that's been in for a lot of specs for the last few weeks. They're taking away these range increases, and yeah, it's going to be kind of a rough expansion to play melee. Mage time anomaly has been updated. Now grants Brain Freeze instead of Fingers of Frost for Frost mages. Inspired Intellect is a new talent. Arcane Intellect grants you an additional 3% intellect choice node with Time Anomaly. Okay, so you can either be getting these random proc things, or you can just get more intellect if you want something consistent. Sunfire Gravity Lapse now hits 5 targets, was 3. Spellslinger, fix an issue preventing Frost and Arcane Splinters from interacting with damage bonuses and proc effects such as Touch of the Magi. Arcane. So this is the Arcane Spellslinger side. Spellslinger is one of those trees that behaves quite differently between Arcane and Frost. So this is just the Arcane Spellslinger side. Spellfrost Teaching has been redesigned. Direct damage from Splinters has a 3% chance to reset the cooldown of Arcane Orb and increase damage dealt by your Arcane Orbs by 50% for 10 seconds. Location of Force of Will and Spellfrost Teachings has swapped. This is weird. The locations of talents has been consistent across all versions of hero talent trees for the most part. Arcane Splinter damage reduced. Embedded Arcane Splinter damage reduced. Controlled Instinct Cleave no longer damages the primary target. And it's been reduced to 20%, was 30%. And Embedded Splinter duration increased to 18 seconds. Splinters were benefiting from Pandemic Dot extensions unintentionally, which was extending their uptime to 20 seconds from 16. This was creating adverse effects and durations where when consuming splinters or applying and maintaining dots. To compensate for the uptime loss, we're increasing the base duration to 18 seconds. It's weird. These are definitely arcane-only changes, but I wonder if these changes are also happening to the Frost version, and I wonder if this change is also happening to the Frost version as well. I don't know. All right, Arcane Ley Drinker's proc chance has been reduced. Arcane Surge is now guaranteed to generate clear casting. Arcane Surge was a reliable source of clear casting that Arcane Mages lost with the removal of mana-based clear casting procs. We're making Arcane Surge proc clear casting baseline to ensure you're rolling into your burns with some more clear casting availability. Arcane Blast now has a 5% increased chance to generate clear casting. Clear casting availability has marginally decreased in pure single target. We're buffing Arcane Blast's chance to proc clear casting to compensate. Spark of the Magi has been redesigned. It now makes your next Arcane Blast, Barrage, or Missiles echo for 25% additional damage. It was increase the damage dealt by these spells, so this will allow you to properly benefit from Spark of the Magi damage bonus on an Arcane Barrage you fired before Touch the Magi is applied. Nice. Mastery Savant now properly increases the damage dealt by Arcane Surge. I wonder if there's a bug on live as well. Ether Attunement has been redesigned. Every 3 times you consume clear casting, you gain Ether Attunement. Ether Attunement primary target damage increase has been reduced to 100, and secondary target damage increase has been reduced to 50. We're still committed to maintaining minimal buff tracking for Arcane. We're also being sensitive to the desire for Arcane mages to be able to reliably acquire and hold effects for use in their burst windows and AoE moments, both of which Ether Attunement excels at. We feel this new design strikes a nice balance that makes the effect easier to track, reliable, and at a higher frequency to help add more moments of excitement for Arcane and AoE. So yeah, Ether Attunement, I think in the last build they made it an RNG proc, and now they're instead still making it function, I think, the way that the current set bonus does, where you just get it every 3 clear casting consumptions. And finally, Resonance and Arcing Cleave have swapped locations. Fire! All right, we got another set of big changes to Fire here. Charring Embers has been removed. So there were some changes. Wow, there's already a new talent here for Charring Embers and moving it and stuff, but I guess they're just removing it. I wonder how... I got to this page, like, 15 minutes after the patch notes came out. Dev note, we've been listening to the feedback regarding Charring Embers and tracking gameplay and have opted to remove it. We're interested in preserving the gameplay of the new Phoenix Reborn and From the Ashes, but we feel they can comfortably exist without Charring Embers. Call of Sun King no longer grants 15% increased Phoenix Flame damage and instead makes Phoenix Flames always crit. Nice. Alexstrasza's Fury no longer makes Phoenix Flames always crit. From the Ashes now grants 15% increased Phoenix Flames damage. They've moved a bunch of these things. Phoenix Reborn now requires 25 hits from 20. Ashen Feather is now a choice node with Alexstrasza's Fury. Inflame's been moved as well. Some new talents. Burning Blood. Damage dealt to targets below 30% health is increased by 10%. Woo. That's powerful. Another new talent, Heat Shimmer. Damage from Ignite has a 5% chance to make your next Scorch, deal 25% increased damage, and deal damage as though your target was below 30% health. Hopefully this means guaranteed crit as well, which, yeah, very powerful as well. New talent, Sparking Cinders. Living Bomb explosions have a 15% chance to increase the damage of your next Flame Strike or Pyroblast. And Controlled Destruction increases damage taken from Ignite by 0.5%, stacking up to 50 times, was 1% stacking up to 25 times. So the same end result, but a slower ramp. Monk, Mistweaver. So again, they've got the change to healing, and the same thing that happened to Trank is happening to Revival. 400% increased baseline healing, reducing down back to normal at 20 and less above 20. New talent, Lotus Infusion. Allies with Renewing Mist receive 15% more healing from you, and Renewing Mist duration is increased by 2 seconds, choice node with Chi Harmony. We'd like to offer a more passive option focused on AoE healing against Chi Harmony. Chi Harmony, now restricting the movement of Renewing Mist for its duration, has its pros and cons, and we feel this addition opens up a optionality a little more, particularly in raid scenarios. Invigorating Mist no longer counts full health allies among its splash cap, but its healing has been decreased. Windwalker. Abilities affected by Ordered Elements, Dance of Chi-Ji, or Blackout Kick now contribute to Drinking Horn Cover, Spiritual Focus, and Heart of the Jade Serpent as if their full chi value was spent. Love it. That's very nice. New talent, Ferociousness. Crit chance increased by 2%. This effect is increased by 100% while Juan is active. Mark of the Crane is now baseline. Crane Vortex now occupies Mark of the Crane's previous location. Dual Threat has been moved to Crane Vortex's previous location, and its damage has been increased. Holy Paladin. Avenging Crusader no longer costs Holy Power, grants an additional charge of Crusader Strike for its duration, and its duration has been increased by 3 seconds. Crusader's Might now additionally reduces the cooldown of Judgment. Holy Light's cast time has been reduced to 2 seconds from 2.5. Nice. Infusion of Light now increases the healing of Holy Light, previously made Holy Light grant Holy Power. And Inflorescence of the Sunwell now increases the additional healing from Infusion of Light for Holy Power. From Infusion of Light for Holy Light was grants Holy Power. Okay. So they're trying to make Holy Light being cast for healing when you have an infusion into something that's actually somewhat compelling. by making the cast time a little bit less painful and then making it so that it actually does potentially a bunch of healing. That seems cool. Ret Pally. Radiant Glory's Wake of Ashes now grants less Wings or Crusade. Radiant Glory's each holy power spent also grants you less Wings or Crusade whenever it procs. Divine Wrath now extends the duration of Radiant Glory separately, and it's a new tooltip that says increases the duration of Wings and Crusade by 3 seconds and Radiant Glory by 1.5 seconds. So reducing a little bit the perma Wings uptime thing. Priest, Voidweaver. We have some numbers nerfs to some of the different effects there. And Disc, we are also reducing the Atonement Healing of Voidheart from 20 to 10. Collapsing Void and Void Blast damage, it looks like specifically for Disc as well. Oracle. Okay, we've got, it looks like a new Oracle tree coming in here. Or a bunch of new talents, at least for it. New talent, Divine Providence. Premonition gains an additional charge. Desperate Measures. Desperate Prayer lasts an additional 10 seconds. Angelic Bulwarp's absorption effect is increased by 15% of your max HP. This is a talent you often didn't take on a lot of Priest builds, but maybe now it's something you will if you're an Oracle. Save the Day. For 6 seconds after casting Leap of Faith, you may cast it a second time for free, ignoring its cooldown. Love it. Clairvoyance. After casting Premonition of Solace, your next Premonition grants all Premonition effects at 100% effectiveness. Premonition now only changes to the next spell in the sequence when Premonition is cast. Prompt Deliverance has been removed. Divine Feathers now increases the movement speed bonus of Angelic Feather by 10%. Perfect Vision is now a choice against Fatebinder and reduces the cooldown of Premonition by 15 seconds, was 6. Fatebender now increases the effect of Premonition by 30% and no longer has conditional requirements. I think this one used to only trigger when you had a different Premonition than your previous one, but now Premonition only changes when Premonition is cast anyway, so I think that wouldn't have mattered. Narrowed Vision's been removed and replaced with Divine Providence, and Divine Providence is in Perfect Vision's previous location. Okay, riddle me this. How is this talent replaced with this talent, but then this talent is in a different talent's previous location? Preventive Measures no longer increases the value of Power Word Shield for Holy or Prayer of Mending for Disc, but the bonuses have been increased to 15% from 10%. Okay. So this is actually, it's going to be better for almost all cases. Like you don't really care about increasing these for these specs, and now the ones you do care about are going to be better. Assured Safety no longer causes Shield to trigger a Prayer of Mending for Discipline, and no longer causes Prayer of Mending to trigger a Shield for Discipline. I assume this means this should say for Holy, this second part. Assured Safety now applies 2 stacks of Prayer Mending and applies a Power Shield at 25% effectiveness, was 20. Grand Reveal has been removed and replaced with Clairvoyance. And there's a new talent for both trees as well that just says your heals are 30% more effective when casting yourself, and those heals are Flash Heal, Shield, and also Heal for Holy. And Serenity for Holy as well. But I guess not Shield for Holy. Okay. Disc Priest. We would like Rapture to be a more satisfying cooldown that flows well with the rotation. With that in mind, we're removing the time pressure aspect of the cooldown and increasing the impact of each Power Word Shield, so that it can be used to triage damage in a more careful and interesting way. Rapture now increases the absorption of your next 3 shields by 80%, was 40% in last 8 seconds. So Rapture, yeah, they really want to turn this into like a more surgical, something more like Presence of Mind for Arcane Mage, something more, I guess more, I'm not sure what other healer specs have something like this. But I guess kind of Unleash Lifey. Not really. Yeah, this is cool. I like this effect. I think that it makes Rapture a little bit less, I press it and now I have to be pressing Shield on CD. Instead, it's I press this and now I have 3 Giga Shields, but like I can still fit in, Penances and Radiances or whatever, and just use this, over the next however long to get some big shields. We're making... so this is the same change to healer CDs, and for Disc, it's happening to Luminous Barrier. Holy! This is the same change they're making, and it's happening to Divine Hymn. Shaman. Totemic is now fully implemented, and there's a new totem model for Surging Totem. Resto, they're making the same change to Healing Tide Totem. This was certainly one of the biggest offenders of raid healing CDs that felt like absolute nothing in M+. If anything, this one might need a higher flat increase and then potentially steeper healing drop-off to make it actually do something in M+, but maybe 400% is enough. Warlock, Hellcaller. They've nerfed some of the damage of Wither. Affliction. We've got some new talents coming in here for AF. Improved Haunt increases the damage of Haunt by 35%, reduces its cast time by 25%, and Haunt now implies Shadow Embrace. Malign Omen. Casting Soul Rock grants 3 applications of Malign Omen, which is basically the current set bonus. Your next Malefic Rapture deals increased damage and extends the duration of your dots and Haunt by 2 seconds. Malefic Touch says Malefic Rapture deals additional Shadow Flame damage to each target it affects. Infirmity. The stack count of Agony is increased by 4 when applied by Vile Taint, or enemies damaged by Phantom Singularity take 10% increased damage from you for its duration. Haunted Soul's been removed. Haunt damage has been increased by 230%, but not in PvP. Bunch of talents have been moved around, and Withering Bolt is now 2 points, but Empowered UA is now 1 point. Okay. I think I like the look of these changes for AF. Yeah, I was initially kind of down on the moving more into Malefic Rapture kind of playstyle, but I think it'll actually be okay with some of the stuff they've done for it, some of the new talents they've added for it, in, like using it in AoE, having it feel less bad, also not having Siphon Life be something you have to worry about. So, yeah, I'm reasonably optimistic about this. This was a fun set bonus as well, so making it a talent seems cool. Destro moved a bunch of talents and removed Flame Rift, Lessons of Space-Time, and Unstable Rift. Okay, so we're not doing that Flame Rift stuff. We're not doing those at all. Warrior. Second Wind has gained an additional effect. While you're below 35% health, restore 1% health every 1 second, up to 2% health the closer you are to death. Second Wind's still probably not a particularly good type of effect. Actually, I think they may have changed it in some other way. It used to be just you heal whenever you haven't taken damage for a while. I think they may have changed it to something else in a previous build. I don't remember what they changed it to, though. But this side of the effect is also pretty weak. Like, usually when you're low on health, I mean, it's nice to get some healing, particularly in some, there could be some, fights like Kajin the Unyielding, where you're below 35% health, but you're somewhat safe, and so the HPS is actually relevant. But usually when you're below 35% health, like, you don't need a little bit of healing. You need to top yourself if you need to heal yourself, or you're just fine, right? Sometimes you're low health and you're just fine because there's no more damage coming out. So this isn't nothing. HPS at low health is valuable, but it's pretty slow. I think it's pretty marginal benefit on that. They moved around some tier 1 talents slightly. Colossus, Bone Shaker now increases the stun duration of Shockwave by 1 second, was 2, and slows the movement of all targets by 40% for 3 seconds after the stun fades. Rally has been renamed to Veteran Vitality because they don't want to be confusing with people saying the word rally. That makes sense. Slayer, Relentless Pursuit's removal of movement impairing abilities can now only occur once every 30 seconds. This effect will not trigger unless you are currently affected by a movement impairing ability when you charge. Nice. So you can't just charge out of slows every charge, but it's not like you'll use it when you don't actually have a slow. A debuff has been added to allow players to track that. Vicious Agility charge now reduces the cooldown of Leap by 2 seconds, was 5. Reap the Storm now has a 20% chance to trigger from Mortal Strike or Bloodthirst, was 2 RPPM on Overpower or Raging Blow. So this will now, whenever something has a chance to trigger instead of being RPPM, this means that it no longer, RPPM has a functionality basically where it's like, we're going to trigger twice per minute, regardless of if you're pressing Raging Blow 7 times or 20 times in a minute. Now, this is going to trigger more often if you're pressing Mortal Strike or Bloodthirst more often in a certain window. Lethal Reflexes has been replaced with Fierce Follow-Through. Mortal Strike and Bloodthirst crits increase the damage of your next Mortal Strike or Bloodthirst by 15%. And then Arms. Crushing Force now increases Mortal Strike damage by 5%, and Mortal Strike crit damage by 5% per point, was Slam. Nice. I don't speak for current Arms Warriors. I haven't played Arms for a while. I would actually be playing some this season, but I don't have Fear Laugh. But if I did, I'd play some Arms this season, so maybe I'll randomly drop one and build it, but I don't even know if I want to build it this season. But at least in the past, I would have been much happier buffing Mortal Strike than buffing Slam. Barbaric Trading now also affects Cleave, but the damage bonus has been nerfed. Seismic Reverberation now also triggers from Cleave, and Battlelord no longer increases overpower damage and now generates 10 Rage when it resets the cooldown of Mortal Strike. Finally, we have player versus player changes here. I guess we'll take a quick little look-see at this. All arena maps now have levers players can click on to indicate they're ready for the game to start. If all players hit the lever, the start timer will skip to 10 seconds remaining. That sounds good. So you're not just, like, if everybody's ready, you can just go. Cool. They've nerfed a bunch of trinket damage and values in PvP combat. These are just like the dungeon trinkets and stuff. And they've also nerfed a bunch of the bonuses from various profession items and stuff as well. And the visual for meta quests has been updated as well. That is one of there are a bunch of different types of quests that fall into different categories that they're trying to make it so that you don't just see the same exclamation point every time. You know how in Dragonflight we have like the campaign quests have a different icon, and now there's like that triangle quest shape. They're really going in on that in War Within and trying to make it so that there's like a bunch of different icons that indicate, oh, this is just a regular side quest, I don't need to bother with this. Oh, this is a quest that's relevant for whatever reason and I should do it. Anyways, those are our changes for this week. This, Hunters, I know in the last couple weeks, they were really sad that they weren't getting patch notes, but look, there's a patch note for Hunters this week as well, so, that's great. Hunters are really getting the attention that they need, they're setting up to have a really good time coming up in War Within. Hope you all have enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.